here's the question, right? If I, as an individual, am affected by discourse in a way that doesn't cause physical violence, but makes me feel so deeply uncomfortable that I don't belong to society, I'm ridiculed because of my race, the way I talk, or my gender, or the way I behave, then surely that means that my valuable insight is shut out by other people's more dominant speech. And this is what we see in cases of people using very violent and loud language to drown out those who oppose them on campuses, in society and whatnot. So wouldn't you say that the attempt to claw back or the right of freedom of speech isn't so far absolute as instrumental? And based on that, therefore, there are some cases where freedom of speech of some individuals can be curtailed if we want to get the better appreciation of the Logos and a better inclusion of more voices that are currently being shut out.
Well, there's a very simple answer to that, which is yes, but I'll elaborate. I mean, the first thing is, like, I'm not an admirer of hate speech laws, but that doesn't mean that I'm naive enough to think that there's no such thing as hate speech. So obviously, if you've ever been involved in an extremely serious argument, you know perfectly well that there's such a thing as hate speech, because you've probably uttered some. So, you know, and there's also no doubt that there are forms of speech that are utterly reprehensible, and some of those are actually already punished by law. You can't incite to violence, you can't libel someone, right? So we have some restrictions already on what's acceptable discourse. Whether it's the case, typically speaking, that some people have more privileged access to free speech than others, well, that's obviously the case. I mean, that's part of power. And power is one of the means by which people climb hierarchies, although the more you can climb a hierarchy by exercising power, the more that's an indication of the fact that that hierarchy has become corrupt. So there's no doubt that these structural impediments to the free exchange of discourse exist. There's also no doubt, as you already laid out, that that's not in everyone's best interest, because what you want, if you have any sense in your society, and this is also why I think that we've put proper emphasis on the sovereignty of the individual, is that you want everyone's logos to have the opportunity to clarify the unknown and reconstitute the world. And if you shut that down, then you risk getting access to the unique insights that that individual might bring. Okay, so I agree with your diagnosis completely. And I think that, you know, even in the West, to ignore the fact that many of our hierarchies tilt towards tyranny and that prejudice still exists in multiple forms is a mistake, although it's only one factor among many and shouldn't be identified as the primary causal determinant of each individual's life. I think that's a dreadful error. The question is, what do you do about it? And the devil's in the details. And as I said already, I'm not an admirer, for example, of hate speech laws, even though there's plenty of hateful speech, because I think the best thing to do is to leave free speech alone as much as you possibly can. Not because that will result in the perfect conditions for free speech, but because anything else that you're likely to do is going to make it worse rather than better. And so that's how it looks to me.
So here Jordan Peterson agreed that there's some problem with free speech.